"Don't touch me." The words exploded through the mansion like gunfire. Everyone froze. The maids, the guards, even the doctor, they all knew that voice. It was the voice that had ordered executions. The voice that had built an empire on fear. But she didn't stop. Her hand moved forward anyway, trembling, reaching toward the man in the wheelchair who had forgotten what human warmth felt like. And when her fingers touched his shoulder, the world shifted. Not loudly, not with thunder or miracles that cameras could catch, but quietly, in the way that broken things sometimes remember how to feel again. This is the story of Dominic Corella, the most feared man in the city, and the woman who saved him by refusing to be afraid. Dark past. Dominic Corella had not always been in a wheelchair. There was a time when he walked into rooms and men looked away. When he moved through the city like a storm, untouchable, unstoppable. He built his empire with calculated violence and cold precision. He wasn't the loudest criminal. He was the smartest, the most dangerous. He didn't need to shout. When Dominic spoke, people obeyed or disappeared. By 35, he controlled half the city's underground smuggling, extortion, protection rackets. He had money. He had power. He had everything except one thing: connection. He had no wife, no children, no friends, only associates. His mother had died ashamed of him. His father, a small-time thief, had abandoned him before he could walk. Dominic learned early that love was weakness, that trust was a liability. So he built walls. He trusted no one, loved nothing, felt nothing, until the night everything burned down. It happened on a cold November evening 3 years ago. Dominic was leaving a meeting at the docks, a routine collection, nothing unusual. But someone had talked. Someone close to him had sold him out to a rival family. The ambush came fast. Gunfire shattered the night. His 2 bodyguards dropped before they could draw their weapons. Dominic ran, returning fire, but there were too many. A bullet grazed his arm. Another shattered the window beside him. Then he felt it, a sledgehammer blow to his spine. He collapsed instantly, his legs gone, his body crumpling onto the cold concrete like a puppet with cut strings. Pain exploded through him, white, blinding, total. He couldn't move, couldn't feel anything below his waist. He remembered screaming. He remembered the warehouse lights spinning above him. He remembered thinking, "This is how I die." But he didn't die. His men found him in time, rushed him to a private hospital. The surgeon worked through the night, extracting the bullet lodged near his spine. When Dominic woke 3 days later, the doctor's face told him everything. "You'll live," the doctor said quietly, "but you won't walk again." Dominic didn't cry, didn't rage. He simply stared at the ceiling, his face carved from stone. Inside, something died. The months that followed were darker than any prison. Dominic retreated to his mansion on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling estate surrounded by walls and guards. He conducted business from his wheelchair, colder and more ruthless than ever. If anything, his brutality increased. He had lost his body. He compensated with fear. But the empire felt hollow now. At night, alone in his bedroom, Dominic would stare at his legs. He'd try to move his toes, willing them with every ounce of strength. Nothing, just dead weight. He'd slam his fists against his thighs, feeling nothing, hating everything. He pushed everyone away. His lieutenant, Marco, tried to visit. Dominic threw a glass at his head. His elderly housekeeper, Rosa, who'd worked for him for years, tried to comfort him. He fired her with cruel words that made her cry. He stopped letting doctors touch him, stopped physical therapy, stopped hoping. "Don't touch me," became his constant refrain. Touch reminded him of what he'd lost, of the body that had betrayed him, of the weakness he couldn't hide anymore. He became a ghost in his own house, pale, thin, bitter. His empire ran on autopilot. He gave orders through Marco. He barely ate, barely slept. He was alive but not living, just existing in a prison of leather and steel, waiting for nothing. Turning point. She arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Dominic didn't ask for her. Marco hired her without permission, knowing Dominic would refuse if asked. The mansion needed a housekeeper, and Rose's niece needed work. Her name was Elena Santos. She was 28 years old, with dark eyes that had seen too much and hands that still chose kindness anyway. She'd grown up in the same poor neighborhood Dominic had crawled out of. Her father died when she was 12. Her mother cleaned houses until arthritis crippled her fingers. Elena knew what it meant to survive. She also knew who Dominic Corella was. Everyone did. But when Marco offered her the job, she needed the money. Her mother's medical bills were drowning her. So she said yes. When she first saw Dominic, she understood why the other staff whispered. He sat in the study, silhouetted against the tall windows, his wheelchair positioned so he could see anyone approaching. His face was sharp, handsome in a cruel way, with dark eyes that looked through people rather than at them. He didn't acknowledge her entrance. "Mr. Corella," she said quietly. "I'm Elena. I didn't ask for you," he interrupted, his voice flat. "Marco hired you. Marco made a mistake. You'll stay out of my way. You'll clean the rooms I'm not in. You'll leave my food outside the door. You will not speak to me unless I speak first. Understood?" Elena nodded. "Understood. Good. Leave." She left, but something in his voice caught her attention. Beneath the ice, she heard something else. Exhaustion, loneliness, pain. For 2 weeks, Elena followed his rules. She cleaned silently, left his meals on a tray outside his study, kept her distance. But she watched. She noticed he barely touched the food, noticed the medication bottles accumulating on his desk, noticed how he sat for hours staring out the window at the gardens he never visited anymore. She noticed he was dying slowly, from the inside out. One evening, she broke the rules. She knocked on his study door. No answer. She knocked again. "I said leave it outside." His voice came, sharp. "You haven't eaten in 2 days," Elena said through the door. Silence. "I don't care," he finally said. "I know," she replied. "But I made something my mother used to make when I was sad. It helped then. Maybe it'll help now." More silence. Then quietly, "Leave it. Go away." She left the tray. But the next morning it was empty. Small things began to change. Elena started leaving notes with the meals. Nothing intrusive. Just small thoughts. "The garden has roses blooming. They're beautiful. It rained last night. The world smells clean today. Your coffee is the way you like it, black, no sugar. Like your sense of humor." Dominic never responded, but he stopped throwing the trays away. One afternoon, 3 weeks after she arrived, Elena was cleaning the hallway outside his study when she heard a crash. Then a sound that made her heart stop. Crying. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just quiet, broken sobbing. She'd never heard him make any sound like that. Without thinking, she opened the door. Dominic was on the floor beside his wheelchair. He'd tried to transfer himself to the desk chair and fallen. His legs were twisted beneath him, useless. Papers scattered around him. His hands were clenched into fists. And he was weeping, not from physical pain, from something deeper, from 3 years of holding everything inside. "Get out," he said, his voice cracking. "Get out." Elena should have left. Every survival instinct told her to leave. Instead, she walked toward him. "Don't," he warned, his voice breaking. "Don't come near me." She knelt beside him. "I said don't." "I know what you said," Elena whispered. "Don't touch me," he screamed, the words ripping from his throat. "Don't you dare touch me. I don't need your pity. I don't need." She reached out anyway. Her hand settled gently on his shoulder. Dominic froze. No one had touched him with kindness in 3 years. Every touch had been clinical, doctors, nurses, people paid to care. But this was different. Elena's hand was warm, steady. It didn't pull away when he flinched. "I'm not here because I pity you," she said softly. "I'm here because I see you." "You see nothing," he whispered, but the fight had left his voice. "I see a man who's in pain," she said. "I see someone who's forgotten he's still alive." Dominic's breath shuddered. And then, impossibly, he felt something. Not in his legs. Not a miracle cure. But in his chest, where his heart had been locked away for so long. Something cracked. Something shifted. A warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with nerves or medicine. It was the warmth of being seen. Of being touched without fear or agenda. Of being human again. "Help me up," he said finally, his voice barely audible. Elena helped him back into his wheelchair with surprising strength. When he was settled, she stepped back, waiting for the anger. But it didn't come. Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, but they changed everything. Conflict and pain. After that day, the walls began to crumble. Slowly at first. Dominic allowed Elena into the study while she cleaned. They didn't talk much, but the silence became comfortable rather than hostile. Then one evening, he asked her a question. "Why are you working here? You know what I am." Elena paused, folding a blanket. "I know what people say you are. It's all true." "Maybe," she said, "but people are more than their worst choices." Spoken like someone who's never made them. "I've made plenty," Elena said quietly. "My brother's in prison. Armed robbery. I could have stopped him that night. I knew what he was planning, but I said nothing because I was afraid he'd hate me. A clerk got shot. Survived, but barely. So don't tell me I don't know about bad choices." Dominic studied her. "You still visit him?" "Every month." "Why?" "Because he's my brother. Because people need to know they're not beyond love." Something in her words lodged in Dominic's chest. "You think I'm beyond it?" he asked. Elena met his eyes. "I think you've convinced yourself you are. I think you're wrong." The weeks that followed brought something Dominic hadn't experienced in years. Companionship. Elena started staying after her shift, bringing dinner for both of them. They'd eat together in the study, talking about small things, books, music, memories of the old neighborhood. Dominic found himself laughing. Actually laughing. He told her things he'd never told anyone. About his childhood. About the first man he'd killed in self-defense, though it stopped being self-defense after that. About the loneliness of power. "I built everything on fear," he admitted one night. I thought that made me strong. Now I can't even stand, and I realize I built nothing. Just emptiness. It's not empty now, Elena said softly. He looked at her. No, it's not. That's when he realized he loved her. Not the possessive, controlling love he'd seen in his world, but something clean and terrifying. He loved her kindness, her strength, the way she saw the man beneath the monster. He didn't tell her. How could he? What could he offer her but a broken body and a dark past? But she knew anyway. One evening, as rain drummed against the windows, Elena set down her cup and said, I need to tell you something. Dominic's heart sank. You're leaving. No, she said. I'm staying. That's the problem. I don't understand. I'm falling in love with you, Dominic, she said, her voice trembling. And I don't know if that's the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever done. Dominic couldn't breathe. Elena, you don't have to say anything, she continued. I know what you are. I know what you've done. But I also know who you are now. And I love you, he interrupted. I don't deserve you. I can't give you the life you should have. But I love you. God help us both. But I do. Elena smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. She leaned forward, and they kissed, soft, careful, full of hope and fear and impossible possibility. For the first time in 3 years, Dominic felt alive. But happiness in his world was always temporary. 2 weeks later, the past came for them both. Dominic received a message from an old associate. Someone was asking questions about him, about the ambush, about who had betrayed him. The informant had a name, Marco, his own lieutenant, his most trusted man. Marco had sold him out to the rival family, trying to take over the empire. When Dominic survived, Marco stayed close, waiting for another opportunity. And now he'd learned about Elena, Dominic's weakness, his leverage. One afternoon, when Elena was leaving for the day, she never made it to her car. 2 men grabbed her in the driveway, dragged her into a van. By the time the guards noticed, she was gone. Dominic received the call an hour later. Marco's voice was smooth, familiar. Hello, Dom. Where is she? Dominic's voice was ice. Safe. For now. We need to talk. If you hurt her, you'll what? Marco laughed. You can't even walk, old friend. You're not the man you used to be. Tell me what you want. Simple. Sign over your operations. Retire. Disappear. And I'll let her go. And if I refuse, then I'll send her back to you in pieces. Dominic closed his eyes. His hands shook with rage and helplessness. You have 12 hours, Marco said. Midnight. I'll send the papers. Sign them and she lives. The line went dead. Dominic sat alone in his study, staring at his useless legs. Everything he'd built, everything he'd done, it all came down to this. Power or love? Empire or Elena? 3 years ago, the choice would have been easy. He would have hunted Marco down, killed everyone involved, consequences be damned. But now he'd felt what it was like to be human again, to love and be loved. He couldn't lose that, couldn't lose her. At 11:45 p.m., the papers arrived. Dominic read them carefully. Complete transfer of assets, territories, operations. Everything. He picked up the pen. His phone rang. A video call. He answered. Marco appeared on screen, smiling. Behind him, Elena sat tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she was alive. "Smart choice," Marco said. "Sign the papers. Then she goes free." "Let me see her first," Dominic said. "Let me know she's okay." Marco ripped the tape from Elena's mouth. She gasped. "Dominic, don't!" she shouted immediately. "Don't give him anything. He's going to." Marco slapped her. Hard. Dominic's vision went red. "I'll kill you for that." "No, you won't," Marco said calmly. "You can't. Sign the papers, Dom. Last chance." Dominic looked at Elena. Blood trickled from her lip, but her eyes were fierce. "I'm not worth it," she said. "Don't let him." "You're worth everything," Dominic said quietly. He signed the papers. "Good," Marco said. "I'll send someone to collect them. And Dom, thanks for everything. It's been a good run." The screen went dark. Emotional resolution. But Dominic hadn't survived 20 years in the underworld by being stupid. He'd made one call before signing. Not to his men, not to his associates. To Detective Sarah Chin. She'd been trying to bring him down for years. They had a strange respect for each other, enemies who understood the game. "I'm giving you Marco Brescia," Dominic had said. "Location, evidence, everything. But you get the girl out first. She's innocent. And what do you want in return?" "Nothing. Just save her." Sarah had been suspicious, but she knew an opportunity when she heard one. At 12:17 a.m., the warehouse where Marco held Elena exploded with police lights. SWAT moved in fast. Marco tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. His men dropped their weapons. They were criminals, not killers. Elena was pulled out, shaken but unharmed. Marco was arrested on kidnapping charges, with enough evidence linking him to the ambush 3 years ago to put him away for life. The empire Dominic had built crumbled that night. But he didn't care. 3 days later, Elena walked back into the mansion. Dominic was in the garden, his first time outside in months. The guards had carried his wheelchair down the steps at his request. When he saw her, something in his chest broke and mended at the same time. "You gave up everything," she said, walking toward him. "Not everything," he replied. "I still have what matters." Elena knelt beside his wheelchair, taking his hands in hers. "The police want you to cooperate," she said. "Testify against the organization. In exchange, immunity for nonviolent crimes. You'd have to give up everything else. But I'd be free," Dominic finished. "We'd be free," she corrected. He looked at her, this woman who'd touched him when everyone else turned away, who'd seen the broken man beneath the monster and chosen to stay. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Maybe not," she said with a small smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." They sat together in the garden as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And in that moment, Dominic felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not in his legs, but in his soul. Movement, life, hope. The miracle wasn't that he might walk again, though the doctor said therapy could help, that some sensation was returning slowly, impossibly. The miracle was simpler and more profound. He'd been dead inside, and she'd brought him back to life. One touch at a time. Epilogue. 6 months later, Dominic stood in physical therapy, trembling, sweat pouring down his face. Not stood, that was too generous. But he was upright, supported by parallel bars and Elena's steady presence beside him. "One more step," she encouraged. "You can do this." His right leg dragged forward. Inches, but forward. His left followed. The therapist watched with quiet amazement. Remarkable. I've never seen nerve regeneration quite like this. But Dominic knew it wasn't just medicine or therapy. It was purpose. Elena had given him a reason to fight, to heal, to try. They'd left the city, moved to a small coastal town where no one knew his name. Dominic testified, brought down what remained of his organization. The police let him walk away. A broken man in a wheelchair wasn't worth prosecuting. They didn't know he was becoming whole again. He and Elena lived simply now. A small house near the ocean. She worked at a local clinic. He did physical therapy every day, building strength in muscles that had forgotten how to move. Some nights, he still had nightmares about the man he'd been, the people he'd hurt. But Elena would wake him gently, her hand on his shoulder, that same touch that had saved him. "You're not that person anymore," she'd whisper. "How do you know?" he'd ask. "Because that person would never have chosen love over power, would never have sacrificed everything for someone else." "I sacrificed nothing," he'd say, pulling her close. "I gained everything." On their wedding day, a small ceremony on the beach with only a handful of people, Dominic walked Elena down the aisle. Walked, with a cane, slowly, his steps uncertain but real. People cried, not because a criminal had found redemption, but because a broken man had found the strength to heal. Because love had proven stronger than fear. Because sometimes the most incredible miracles are the quietest ones. As they exchanged vows with the ocean behind them and the sun warming their faces, Dominic thought back to that moment in his study, when Elena had reached out despite his screaming, when her touch had reminded him he was human, when everything had changed. "I love you," he whispered as they were pronounced husband and wife. "I know," she smiled. "I felt it the moment I touched you." And she had. That day, when her hand settled on his shoulder, she'd felt his heart beating beneath the ice and anger. She'd felt the man he could become, and she'd refused to let go. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is reach out to someone who's convinced they're untouchable. Sometimes one act of kindness can shatter years of darkness. Sometimes love doesn't cure physical wounds, but it heals something deeper. It reminds us that we're worth saving, that we're not beyond redemption, that even broken things can learn to feel again. Dominic Corella had been many things. A criminal, a killer, a man consumed by power and fear. But in the end, he became something he never thought possible. A man who chose love over everything else. And in choosing love, he found the strength to stand again. Not just physically, but in every way that mattered. In the end, we're all searching for the same thing. Someone who sees our brokenness and doesn't walk away. Someone whose touch reminds us we're still capable of feeling, of healing, of becoming more than our worst moments. Dominic found that in Elena, and in finding it, he discovered the greatest miracle of all. That it's never too late to choose differently. That love doesn't demand perfection. It just demands courage, the courage to let someone in, to be seen, to believe we're worth saving. We all carry wheelchairs of our own, pain, trauma, mistakes that have paralyzed us emotionally. But somewhere out there is a hand reaching toward us, refusing to be afraid. The question is, will we let them touch us? Will we allow ourselves to feel again? Or will we stay trapped in our loneliness, convinced we're beyond healing? Dominic made his choice. What will yours be?